Hi, my name is Darrell, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about a changer turntable called a GARRARD Type A. I purchased this on eBay. I bought one like this way back in 1960 and gave it away when I got what I thought was a better one. And since then, I haven't listened to a lot of the vinyl records that I have because it takes so much time to deal with them. When I received the GARRARD table, and I guess it's pronounced Garrard as opposed to Gerard, which I mispronounced for many years, it wasn't working right. There was, of course, no manual with it, and I did a Google search and came up with a free manual and downloaded that PDF file. This turntable was removed from a piece of furniture rather than having its own base, which is called a plinth, that you normally purchase these with. So I am making one, and it looks like this right here. This actually I made from teak from a sailboat, and when you make it, you have to get it just exactly right inside so that none of the moving parts underneath here bind against the cabinet. But anyway, this is called a plinth. I can send you actually a schematic of the inside of this and the dimensions if you want to build your own. And I'll give you my email address at the end of this presentation. Let me show you what this looks like underneath. You will hardly believe it. This is like a Swiss watch. Everything about this 1960 turntable is mechanical, like an old grandfather's clock. So when you get this thing, you're going to have to be very careful when you deal with it, and you don't want to force anything or change any of this mechanical stuff. You change one little thing or force it or break it, and the whole thing won't work, and then you can't find anybody to repair it. Now underneath here, you can see, if you get real close up, there are certain points where you could oil. What I did is I oiled every little spot I could with 3-in-1 oil to make sure that everything was working. And if I found it was sticking, and it would likely stick if this has been around for 50 years and hasn't been re-oiled, you take a Q-tip with some rubbing alcohol or some clear solvent and help out the joint that you're trying to free up. That's the very first thing you should do when you get this unit. Now I'm going to talk about how you would take this thing apart. I have it partially apart, but I'll explain what you'd do. First thing you would do, of course, is take off this head, if you have one on there. You can buy these up on just the head alone on eBay, and with or without cartridges. This, by the way, is a cartridge. It's actually a Shure M7D, which was one of the best known cartridges early on. And it has a stylus, and the stylus is right here. You can put in yourself, and you can get a new stylus for this for about $23 sent to you. And you have to very, very carefully with tiny, tiny pliers, not pliers, but actual needle nose, the smallest needle nose you can get, and gently pull this out, and then gently put one back in. Cartridges can cost you anywhere from $50 to $200 if you have to get a new cartridge. This is a unit that you pile the records on, and you put the record on here, and actually this tips really out of plane when you pile the records on. This, by the way, is a spindle that comes with the thing. You can buy these spindles for about $15 on eBay if you don't have one. And this is the second little spindle that you put in if you decide you don't want to use the record changer and you just want to use this like a normal turntable. Now I've taken the head off here, and I'm going to use a little lockdown. And you have to be careful with this lockdown, because if you ever put this on to make sure that this doesn't bounce all over everything and hurt your stylus, you mustn't forget to undo this before you start to play it, because the whole mechanism will start running, and this will be fixed and it'll bind and could do irreparable damage. I think this is a kind of a design flaw, and the reason it's a design flaw is because none of this is electronic. They couldn't do that, so they just had to have you remember. Anyway, when you start taking this apart and you've done all your oiling underneath, the first thing you do is you take off the rubber mat. Okay. Second thing you do is then you pull out, you may need to use you pull out the little, it's actually an advertisement for the thing, and then there's a little clip in here, and you remove this clip because you can't get things off unless this clip locks things down in here. So we'll take that clip out. The next thing you do is you lift off what is called really a flywheel. This is a big heavy thing, don't drop it. This thing is heavy because it acts as a flywheel. Once this thing runs, if there are any variations in electricity or so on that would make your record go, this thing evens them out because it's so heavy. Okay, you take that off, and you're getting down to the real meat of this thing. This is the underneath plate, and I put on a little tape here to make it so it's softer on here. What you're going to do is you're going to lift this plate off, but you do not go over here and bend that thing and bend the spindle. You've got to take two screwdrivers, one on each end, and then pull this up off the spindle. Okay. So we're going to take this off. And now you really get down to the meat of this. The most critical component in this turntable is this little wheel. This is actually a pulley, a rubber pulley that goes up against the inside of this black thing and rubs up against it when you operate the mechanism. You can see how it moves like this. This thing rubs with friction on the inside of this, and this is where the rubber meets the pavement, almost literally. This thing dries out. After 50 years, the rubber gets hard, and it turns out that you don't get a new one because they don't make them anymore. You can get this by taking off this real tiny clip in here, and don't lose it. And then you can take this, pull it off, put it in a carefully wrapped envelope, and you can send it to a guy who will add totally new rubber to the outside and send it back to you for a price of around 43 bucks. And I did. This guy, whose name is Adam, a really nice guy, he's in, I guess, Long Island, is at dualparts@cs.com. That's DUALPARTS at C like in cat, S like in Sam.com. When you send it to him, he'll probably have it back to you in a week or 10 days. You go back and put that baby on here, and you got nice soft rubber that will be good for friction. The way this thing changes speeds, it rides up and down on another spindle here, and you see when I move this lever to change the speed, it goes up, down and up even higher to make it go real slow or fast. So you can actually play 33 1/3, you can play 45s, and you can even play the old time 78 RPM records with this machine. It also has a 16, and I have never seen a record that goes at 16 revolutions per minute. Turning this thing upside down is tricky because this thing will fall out on the floor, and if that fell out and broke, that wouldn't be good. We've gone through that you must be very careful to undo this clip. Okay. What I didn't mention here is that this tone arm is adjustable. There is a little screw underneath over where my finger is right here that adjusts where the tone arm comes down on a record. Sometimes in shipping, this will get kind of screwed up. So you'll adjust that with this little screw, and all of this comes from the manual, which I don't know if I mentioned that the manual is downloadable for free for this GARRARD type A changer. Just go up on Google and search for a manual for it. I've seen them up on eBay for $10, but they're free up on the web. Anyway, that adjustment is for the Tonearm where it comes down. There is an adjustment on here for how heavily the Tonearm rides down on records. And you have to be very careful because depending on the cartridge you've got, some cartridges demand like a 1.5 grams, some demand 3 grams, and you just have to look up on the web. And vinylengine.com is a very important website to go up for just about anything for this. You can adjust this back here. There's a little screw and this magnet moves back and forth, and that determines how heavily it runs on a record. You don't want it too light, and the stylus and Tonearm will skip on the records. They'll skip over one groove and another and so on. Too heavily and it wears out your records and wears out your stylus. This is actually what the cartridge looks like, and the stylus here that's bent. I bought a new stylus for $23 by the time I got it, and that is available from Dual Parts at cs.com that I talked about before. So that part is available. When you put this in and you reassemble it after you've got all this in here, and you oil at critical points. One critical point is right in the center here. Another one is down below the brass item right here, and you must be absolutely sure that you don't get any oil on this, because you get oil on this surface, it'll spin on there, and you don't want that to happen. When you reassemble this, get everything all put on here right. You have to make sure that when you reassemble this on, this matches this right here on there, because they're carefully balanced. When you get it all on with your thing on, you put this over on here, you want to make sure that there are lots of little cords. See this one right here? And underneath here, there are other little tiny cords. You want to make sure that none of those electrical wires bind on your plinth in there. I'll make it run for you now. I've got it just about finished. I'll make it run to show you how this operates. Notice this, feels the record, puts the record down, puts the Tonearm down on the record. And if you had a stack of records on here, it would do one after another. This little unit right here feels how big a record is that is going to play and determines where the Tonearm comes down on the record. Okay, let me add one more thing. Some things to think about when you're handling vinyl records. I see up on YouTube people mishandling them, and I want to talk a little bit about this. With vinyl records, you never leave them on uneven surfaces like this, and you never leave them in the direct sunlight where they can heat up. And obviously you wouldn't leave it on a register or a radiator or anything like that. Keep them cold, and you can stack them flat like this, but you don't want to stack them like this. You don't want to have them in your record thing where they're crooked like this, because they'll warp. You either got them straight or flat. Another thing is, when you handle them, you don't just reach in there and grab them with your hands and then put your hands on the grooves. You never touch the grooves. And how you can get away without touching them is you push this against your body, open this up and press it open like its mouth is coming open. You take your hand like this with your fingers, edge, and your thumb, reach in there and pull the record out, touching it only with your fingers and right out here on the edge. Now, Also, you don't, if you get a record that has somehow gotten misshapen, don't play it anymore, because it will damage the stylus on your cartridge when it goes up and down and up and down. It'll make it hop around. Occasionally you can get a slight warp and get away with it, but in general you don't play records that are warped. When you put it back, I would suggest that you have an inner, most of these come with an inner jacket. I put it in the inner jacket. This one is so old I don't have the jacket left, but I use the inner jacket, put it in the inner jacket, then turn that jacket sideways, and then put it inside your outer jacket. In that way, you get less dust. And you always, before you put them in there, just blow the dust out. Dust is the most critical thing about vinyl records, and also fingerprints, because when you get fingerprints on them, they're greasy, and dust settles on the minute dust settles constantly as you're playing, and when the stylus drags over the fingerprint with the dust on it, it embeds the dust in the groove. Now, if you do by chance get a fingerprint on them, you can, or if something is very dusty, you can take a damp, clean cloth and wipe circular around on it, not crosswise, but circular on very lightly all over the record to clean the record. It's not a bad idea to do that intermittently, because just simply handling them in the air and so on, dust gets on them. This is one of the reasons that vinyl was thought to be inferior to CDs, is what's called a signal to noise ratio, and that is the background noise behind the music. When you're like in between bands on it, you can actually hear that going on, and you can actually hear flecks of dust as it goes through that. So you want to keep your records very clean, in a cool place, stacked vertically or horizontally.